Let's go to Russell Wilson. And a story came out on The Athletic that was, ooh, it was explosive. Now, one thing, if you remember a couple years ago, Russell Wilson, when he was the man of the year, that was before the information on his charity came out that, less than 50% of every dollar that goes into his charity goes to charity. And I saw JJ Watt, I think 97 cents on every dollar that comes into his charity goes to charity. Listen, I don't run a charity, given some over the years, but don't run one. So I was hesitant to jump on Russell's back but just you start looking at some of the other charities, cents per dollar go to charity is like his ratio was a little low. Who knows? I'm not going to call it a sham, but some shady, it feels like some shady things are going on there. But then this story comes out that Russell Wilson wanted Pete Carroll and John Schneider fired. And if you remember a couple years ago when he won the Man of the Year and was sitting next to Roger Goodell, stories were coming out. He wanted to be like Tom Brady. He wanted to be treated not just like a star, but if people listen to him and let him dictate personnel moves, kind of what Aaron Rodgers was bitching and moaning about. Basically, he wanted to be treated like an NBA star, where when he says jump, management says how high. One thing Russell Wilson just learned is the NFL is not the NBA. It's a management coach-led operation, which happens to be the most pro fans, right? Because the players don't get to do whatever they want, whenever they want. Because I got news for you. Turns out not all players know what the fuck they're doing when it comes to personnel. Why? Because they don't really watch, and it's not really their profession. Their profession is playing. Who was the guy that wanted Russell Westbrook on the Lakers? Oh, his name's LeBron James. How'd that one work out? Not great. So Russell Wilson thought he could go to owner, who, remember, it was the daughter because Paul Allen had passed away, and thought he'd get John and Pete fired. And what he found out was a couple weeks later, he was traded, which based on 1 year could go down. Just based on the 1 year is one of the great trades in the history of the NFL for Seattle. And looks like potentially one of the worst trades in the history of the NFL for the Denver Broncos. But one thing I think Russell Wilson needed, and it was always like no one could ever quantify what his issue was, right? He's not like some raging asshole. He's not lazy. He's not like doesn't care about football. It's just like this guy's really weird and he's sneaky, kind of uses weirdness, even though maybe it's just an enormous ego. It's all about him. Sneaky, kind of got some narcissistic qualities. He's just a little out there. But when you kind of put your thumb down and you go, I want these guys gone, like that's a pretty bold play. And it clearly didn't work. Now, one thing when you read the article is it goes into depth about, Jake Heaps, former BYU quarterback, who's like a practice squad guy, who is now Russell's personal quarterback. He wanted him around a lot, the office. I think this one's pretty simple. In most high-level businesses, when you produce as a high level, you get some leeway, right? Colin Cowherd and Dan Patrick can do some things that I cannot. Just like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady get a little leash that Mac Jones and Justin Fields are just not going to get. Welcome to capitalism. When you produce for whoever your boss is, whoever your partner is, they're going to let some shit slide. So I've said this over and over, like having the office wouldn't be that weird if they would have won 12 games and he threw 38 touchdowns. But when he was worse than Geno Smith and the team sucked, having the office was a big deal. Ultimately, the quarterback is going to spend more time watching film, more than likely, than any other player on the team. And probably an equal amount is some coaches on the staff. So having a quote unquote designated place, whether you want to call it an office or a film room for the quarterback to go, isn't that weird? And depending on the setup of the organization, like a lot of coaches use their meeting room to watch film. So where's the quarterback going to go, right? What if the quarterback coach is using the quarterback meeting room to watch film and Russell didn't have a spot? I don't even think it's that weird. And I've said before, when Peyton Manning got there, he got special treatment back in the day with the Denver Broncos. Same with the Colts, because he was a film junkie, part of life. But when you don't do well, and then everyone thinks you're like a raging weirdo, and that's the problem. So these articles can come out, and Russell immediately, one of the things that jumped out to me in this article is that this offseason, because it started getting so ugly, that he hired a new PR person. It's like, Russell, do you not get it, man? Can you not just be a normal human? Now, going back to him wanting John and Pete fired, the guy that he wanted was Sean Payton. And I was thinking about one comparison that's going to happen over the next 6 months is Sean Payton and Drew Brees. Sean Payton and Drew Brees. One of the things Drew Brees, he's a much better pocket quarterback in his prime than Russell Wilson. Obviously, Russell, in theory, brings a stronger arm, mobility, things that Drew doesn't bring to the table. But I would say, of talking to people that have played with Drew, of just following his career, reading articles about him, just the entire Drew Brees experience, I'd say the number one thing the guy hung his hat on is being a beloved human being inside the walls by coaches, by teammates, by literally everybody that he went to work with. Everyone to a man just swore by the guy. A lot like Tom Brady. They just loved the human being, what he represented from a work ethic standpoint, as a guy, the way he treated people. That I think the best teammates, when someone calls you a great teammate, you know what ultimately that means? Is especially when it comes to a quarterback, no matter how famous, no matter how rich, he can just kind of act like a normal human when he's sitting there at the locker with me. And that, to me, is the biggest question mark Russell Wilson has moving forward is, can the guy act like a normal person? Because I think once you get to a certain spot of fame and wealth, like, if that's who you are, it's kind of who you are, right? Like, Tom Brady ultimately can sit down with some of his boys and just kind of slam some beers, right? Drew Brees could clearly just kind of hang out with the guys. Like, that is kind of a knock on Russell Wilson that he doesn't have that in the back. So ultimately, like, the office and the film room, like, whatever. If he was winning, I want my quarterback watching a lot of film. If Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow come to me and go, hey, man, I need some place to watch film. You don't think those organizations are going to put a room together so the guy has a place to be able to watch film and take notes? Of course they are. Whether you want to call that an office, whether you want to call that a bunker, you can label it whatever you want. But Russell's downfall was, one, his ego started outsizing his production. Wanted guys fired. You're not in control, Russell. See ya. Adios. Give us 2 1s. Give us a bunch of players. Give us a bunch of picks. You pay that money. Now your contract is a major albatross if you don't become, I would say, immediately a top 10 quarterback. I can't be paying you these wages and you be the 14th best quarterback. You got to be like the 6th to make it worth it. And this notion of Peyton and Brees, like, a huge reason for quote unquote Peyton and Brees was Drew Brees, the guy. And I don't know if Russell Wilson has that in the back. So he can deny this stuff all he wants. Like, bullshit, man. We all know what you were doing and you lost. Sometimes when you make a power play, whether it's a small power play, like, you know, you're an $80,000 employee and the guy you're working for makes $130 and you go to the boss and you want him gone and it works. It's a small power play. And some power plays are with guys making $10, $15 million and a quarterback making 40 and he wants to get rid of a guy. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But when it doesn't work, you know, you come at the king, you better not miss, because when you miss, it backfires. And now let's face it, like, there's nothing this PR lady, I love PR. This isn't the fucking 1990s. We live in a day and age where there are a lot of just normal people doing content. Like, we see the difference between authentic content and authentic people. Like, we've never had more examples out there to know what's real and what's not real. So I think he either can change or he can't, and I would bet against it.